Hello and welcome back to WMBN. Over the years, I've put together a toolkit to keep me riding while traveling, race weekends, and daily riding. It's more of a maintenance kit than repair or service. It's when you can't get to the shop for that fix, adjustment, or sweetening. Unless you're 100% comfortable and have all the right tools, I would let the shop take care of all of your repairs and servicing. We don't want to void warranty, damage the bike, or cause any safety issues. On that note, I've emptied out my toolbox, and if you like geeking out on this stuff, this is what's kept me running on those race days, travels, and daily riding. I've put them into certain groups like drivetrain, brakes, suspension, wheels, and some other various stuff. Starting out with drivetrain, a good lube is essential. I've chose Rock and Roll, which is half wash, half lube. You can see it separated there. And I like this particularly because it washes and lubes your chain at the same time, gets all that gunk out of there, and lubes it, which is like 2 for 1. At the end of every winter, or Granite Bay, like super sandy, soggy day where it's sand and grit all up everywhere, I will use a chain scrubber and a solvent and really clean that chain. But you can also, like, the reason I like Rock and Roll so much is you can put a ton of Rock and Roll in there and clean and lube your chain at the same time. You'll be amazed at how much gunk hides out in that chain, even though you're cleaning it all the time. This pedal remover and installer was key. I should have bought this a long time ago. I've gone through about everything trying to get pedals on and off. Leverage is your friend. On new pedals, they should be hand tight, shouldn't be a problem. But on those old pedals or BMX bikes or dirt jumpers where they've been on there for so long, key tool right here, leveraging that off. I should have bought this a long time ago as well. Another park tool, 2 for 1 here. If your brake pads, like your tire's off and you accidentally hit your brake and the brake pads come in, this material will not damage your brake pads, and you can go ahead and separate those brake pads out once again. Also, when you're changing your brake pads, same tool, using to push those pistons back all the way so you can put your new brake pads in. 2 for 1 on this one. Awesome tool. This, I believe, came on a bike that was shipped to me, but I held on to it. Basically what it is it's just a spacer to hold the brake pads apart during shipping, but it's also a tool to push those brake pads apart. So I think I had this first, and then I went on to this tool, but still kept it because it has its use. I think my initial tool that's still in my toolbox was for separating brake pads, is I would fold like a credit card in half, put it up into the brake pads, and use something to push those brake pads back out. Still have it, still works if needed. I do keep my last set of brake pads. And the reason is I've torn out an entire brake pad and hanger out of the rear housing, and I have no idea how I did it. But so now I just keep extra brake pads, hanger, and retaining pin just in case that ever happens again. And I just swap them out as I'm changing brake pads once a year when needed. A good brush, not really totally necessary, but I'm amazed at how much I use it. Just getting grime off the cassette or grime off certain kind of hard to reach areas, or kind of picking mud out of certain areas. It's worth it. Another park tool. Awesomeness. Brake, like a rotor tool. Another huge one that I should have got a long time ago. I used to do the old like cloth and pliers on a bent rotor. This is just a precision tool. It's bent on shipping, a crash, a hard G-out or a bang, that torque or torsion will bend those rotors. So a rotor truing tool, money, just getting those easily back into true. Moving on to suspension, air pump for your shocks and suspension. This is huge, especially if you like fine tuning the exact amount of pressure you like in there. And I found out that on Rock shocks it's 96 and on Fox it's 92, and it's just because I had the pump on me and kept trying all the different air pressures until I found something outside of the rebound and compression that worked for me. Speaking about rebound and compression, after fine tuning all of that, and all you're left with is the progression of your suspension or your front fork. That's where the spacers come in. So I needed a way to get the spacers. RockShox, awesome. They just use a cassette removal tool, and that will take the top of that cap off so you can add or subtract spacers to your RockShox. Fox is a little different. I believe I used this at first, but then I went on to their specific tool that removes that air cap, so you can get in there and add and remove Fox spacers. If you're in there, you may as, I don't know if it's the piston, whatever that is, but they suggest that you reapply oil to that as well. So Slick Honey is what I apply every time I hop into there and add and remove spacers. Secret weapon, stanchion oil. This stuff is probably one of my favorite things here and most effective. Not only to get the grime out of your seals, but especially on Fox, I've noticed that a little bit of that, work it in and don't wipe it off, just leave it on there. That first inch, 2 inches of travel, that small bump sensitivity goes through the roof. Might not apply to everybody. I have a DHX2 rear coil on a bike, and Fox makes a specific tool to adjust your high and low speed compression, high and low speed rebound. You can do it with Allen keys, but I just had this in my pocket and was just out there fine tuning after every lap, getting that suspension right. Might not be for everybody, something good to have if you have a DHX2. Moving on to wheels. I have a pair of levers on my bike or in my pack or wherever at all times, but they do break. So I do have a second pair of levers on standby. 2 ounces of sealant. 2 ounces of sealant, because if you have a horrible blowout, 2 ounces will get that tire back on and sealed. If you just need to add an ounce or two because it's been a few months and you're drying out, add an ounce or two. Speaking of adding an ounce or two, I carry an extra valve core on me. I also carry a valve core remover. Key in adding that sealant through the valve core, or if you have a plug and you're trying to add air, remove the valve core and get in there and you can unplug it. So extra valve core remover. I've used them both a few times. An extra tube for the extra tube I already have. Two's better than one. I think this is the oldest tool I own from the 90s, like BMX days. Spoke wrench. I think after every, most used and longest owned, after every ride I always check spoke tension. Just making sure all those spokes are tight and that wheel's true. You should have a floor pump, especially if you like playing with tire pressures, going low or going high, whatever you're trying to do, but also just reminding you to check your tire pressure before the ride. I do have a hand pump, just in case, throw it in the pack, or if I've left that in the truck or it's not accessible, I have that in the toolbox. I do have an extra set of bar ends, pedals, and grips. I hope to never use them, but there's been some fun wipeouts or instances that have ruined pedals, ruined grips, or torn off bar ends, so I have them. I just have them in my toolbox. A rubber mallet for those stubborn things that need a little, it's better than a hammer doing damage. You know, I haven't used this huge crescent in a long time. I bought it, pull cranks off, and obviously it's not the right tool. You need a crank, or not a crank, but a pedal remover and installer or whatever it's called. But this has come in handy with my dirt jumper, who still has bolt-on axles. Old BMX bikes, older kids bikes with those pedals, and you need to let that leverage. Awesome tool. I do have an Allen key set, a metric set. This sometimes comes in more handy than a multi-tool, just to give you that little extra leverage. But a multi-tool is way better because it just has everything on it, especially now that everything's not just like hex Allens, but it's a mix of hex and star. So a good multi-tool with star and hex, maybe get a bonus like a chain brake or the pin push. I also have one, back in the day, not everything had the kingpin with, you can take on and off. So even if you break a chain, it's good to have one of these. You can take that link out and at least you could hang with what chain's left for the remaining and just push that pin out, remove the link, and tighten that up a bit. Pipe cutters. Once or twice used on forks, but handlebars. Taking that little bit off, that lot off, whatever you need to do. It's awesome to have and to be able to do it on your own, so you can just take a little off at a time and not commit to maybe an inch or something. Pipe cutters have come in handy, shoosh, a lot. Now I just don't cut them, I rut them as wide as they come. Pliers, frayed ends, housings, grab and pull, clip, whichever one you need. Not used too much. That usually waits for the service or the repair at the bike shop, but in case you need them, you know, that frayed wire is just scratching your calf or your ankle. It's just right there by your derailleur or old school V-brakes or something. It's always good to have. That's about, one big thing. Polylube. Not everybody really thinks about it, but I always rub or apply a little bit every time I install a pedal or anything metal to metal, not suspension, but like link to frame or even the hubs to the frame. I'll put a little on there. I always feel it's just kind of a little bit of weatherproofing, rust proofing, and just keeps that metal to metal from not rubbing together. A couple shop rags. That's about it. Any questions you have about these tools, leave a comment below, like what they are, who makes them. If you have a favorite tool that I missed and I need, leave it in the comments below. Other than that, hope everyone's well. I'll talk to you later.